Hey, it's Mazzy, and it's the 29th of November, 2022, the morning when I'm recording this. 20 years ago was the concert for George. 21 years ago today, Beatle George Harrison passed away of cancer. 21 years ago, we were staying down in Half Moon Bay, and I remember early in the morning driving back up to San Francisco and hearing on the radio that George Harrison had passed away. It wasn't totally unexpected, but of course, it really, it tugs at you, especially someone that you've enjoyed as an artist all your life. Obviously, not as tragic in the same sense of when John Lennon died, because that was out of nowhere, and that was, we know what happened there. But it still affected me, and I remember just driving along Highway 1 up along Devil's Slide back into San Francisco, and it was an emotional moment. Eric Clapton put together this concert for George Harrison. Eric Clapton was a very close friend of George's. They shared the love of music. They shared a wife, not at the same time, in terms of Patty Boy, Patty Harrison, Patty Clapton, Layla, something written about Patty. But to his credit, Eric Clapton needed to be the one to put this show together. And I heard about this concert for George that would take place 20 years ago today on November 29th, 2002 at the Royal Albert Hall. And I really wanted to go. And I ended up going on Craigslist, I guess Craigslist London. And looking back on it, I think, God, I really trusted this person. And it worked out in the end. So I find this woman who has an extra ticket. Here is the ticket. This is my ticket to the concert for George. It cost £150. So what's that, $150, $160, give or take? God, what a deal, right? It was a lot then, but still a deal for this show. I was row 9, seat 32 of the Royal Albert Hall. So I contacted this woman, and it turned out this woman was an expatriate American from San Francisco who was living in London with her husband and family. And she had an extra ticket. They were all going. She had one extra ticket. And she still had a bank account in San Francisco. So I was to deposit the money into her bank account in San Francisco. I would meet her at a cafe the day before the concert in London and get the ticket. That's trust, right? I had American Express points, and I used it to get a upper class, or not first class, but upper business class ticket on a 747 on Virgin Atlantic Airways. And I flew to London alone, spent a week in London, and it was one of the best experiences I ever had. I did meet her. She did give the ticket. I sat with her and her family, and it was, if you haven't seen it, you owe it yourself to watch this. Now, I saw it theatrically when it came out, and the theatrical version, the original version, has the concert and sort of backstage rehearsal footage. And I watched that, and I watched it once when I got the DVD. It's not a Blu-ray, but I think so far at least, I think it's going to be coming out again in the new year, a new transfer of it, I assume, and maybe a surround sound mix. But I think, in this case, the DVD actually looks better than the Blu-ray, at least in my opinion. But I really just like watching the film without the backstage thing. There's two versions again, with the back, and then just the concert straight through, and it's fantastic. CD came out. I went to the Royal Albert Hall early that day, and there weren't a lot of people there. And I went around the back, and there's an entrance that says artists, and there was obviously a guard there or something letting certain people in. And I just walked up there. I didn't even say anything. I just showed my ticket, and he let me in. And this was like 2 hours before the show, and I think an hour at least before anyone else was let in. What the fuck? I hadn't been to the Royal Albert Hall before. That was my first experience. I roamed around the building. No one checked my ticket. No one came up to me. There was a bar off one of the rows higher up in the back. I remember went in that, I had a glass of champagne, It was, I mean, that's the perfect thing to do. I remember during the break, I was so excited. I called my friend David on the East Coast, who had written the book with the Beatles England book with, and just told him how great it was. So I just remember looking down, and you could smell you could smell saffron. You could just smell the incense in the air there. They handed out these books, The Concert for George. It's a little kind of beautiful little program. Very simple. Just full of some photographs. And we didn't really know who was going to show up. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire set list because if you haven't seen it, you owe it to yourself. One of the best two special guest type concerts I ever went to. Concert for George and, of course, The Last Waltz. Just, a quarter century apart. But two amazing, almost exactly, 26 years apart, I believe. And now it's been 20 years since this event took place. Several years ago, they did put out a 4 LP box set the first time it came out on vinyl. And this is how the box set came out. Concert for George. See that? But of course, being limited editions, there was a limited edition which I had to get, being the Beatle fan I am. And this is this. Just a wonderfully designed package. Purple. The stage setup. Photo essay on the entire performance and the rehearsals with Danny Harrison, Ravi Shankar. Anushka conducted. I love the Indian section. Ravi Shankar sat on the side of the stage with Olivia Harrison. Obviously Tom Petty. Conspicuous in his absence was Bob Dylan. I don't know why Bob Dylan didn't show up. There is a recording you can hear of Bob Dylan mumbling about a month or two before this, said, George Harrison, there's a show in Georgia and we can't make it. So he plays a Harrison song at one of his shows about a month or so, maybe, give or take, prior to this. And he wasn't there. I don't understand that. He could have rearranged his schedule, in my opinion. But so you got CDs and vinyl in this configuration. And there's the 360-12 Rickenbacker. And of course the iconic George with his Gretsch. Just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful show. Wonderful show. Also have this from Genesis Publications. I'm a collector of Genesis limited edition books. This is the Concert for George. What an amazing set as well. Now this is their leather-bound, hand-bound set. This just came out a few years after. Mine's number 164 out of 3,000 deluxe copies. In the intermission, there was parts of Monty Python doing a lumberjack song. Tom Hanks was one of the lumberjacks. I could recognize him because I sat on his side. But Ravi Shankar wrote a special piece, and Eric Clapton played with the Indian musicians as well. Just everything was perfect. It was one of those tug at your heart moments of joy, of loss, but of in a way happiness. And they didn't do Within You Without You. I thought that would have been the perfect song to do with the full Indian orchestra, and it would have been great. It would have been great. Now they have a repro ticket here, and they did include another copy of that Purple Hand program they gave out. You know, I tell you, one of the highlights, and I think it was not on the CD originally, but it's the song Horse to Water by Sam Brown. This rocks. This was a soulful night, soulful performance. If you haven't seen the documentary, haven't seen the show, the DVD, you need to watch this. Watch it tonight if you can. Just find it, stream it, watch it somewhere, rent it, watch it. Now, Horse to the Water is a song that you may not know. It's not on any of the George Harrison albums. It was on a collection comp, one of the comps that Jules Holland put together, various artists, where he backs them up. And it's a great, great song. And George sings. It's got a funky beat to it. It should have been on a George Harrison record. Just a little bit of an overview, just a few highlights from me, from my point of view there. Again, we didn't know who was coming out next. We didn't know the list of songs that they were going to perform that night. I love the opening prayer, the hymn, the Indian musicians. I love Anushka conducting a piece specially written for George by Ravi Shankar. I loved when they recorded and came out and performed The Inner Light with Jeff Lynne on acoustic guitar singing it. And he nailed it. He just made it a wonderful song. And that's a song that doesn't always get a lot of love with those Indian musicians, but what a great, great song that is. Monty Python, I mentioned with the Lumberjack song, Instead of My Face. Old Brown Shoe, not a song that is one of my favorite, but Gary Brooker from Procol Harum is one of my favorite vocalists of the British scene. Of course, A Wider Shade of Pale, and he played piano. And Taxman by Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, I Need You. Handle with Care with Jeff Lynne, Danny, and Tom Petty. Now, of course, Ringo doing Photograph. What's My Name? Paul McCartney comes out and does a couple of songs, but he did a version with Eric Clapton of Something. And this is the first time we've heard him do what he ended up doing in concert subsequent years, and to this day in concert, where he opens up strumming the ukulele. George, you go to George's house, the ukuleles come out, and Paul repeatedly tells that story to this day. But that was the first time where he does his version, and then it goes into the song of Eric Clapton on that lead guitar riff, and they go into that sort of beautiful version of Something with Paul and Eric Clapton singing. And I really liked My Guitar Gently Weeps, and hearing Eric Clapton play the lead on that, which he played on the White Album, so it was appropriate in playing that, and him and Paul on the piano, the way he played it on that song, on the White Album song, was just wonderful. And the two of them singing and Paul doing the high part, the harmonies, his voice hadn't gone yet in 2002. And it's just, seeing obviously two of the Beatles there and seeing all the guests that came up. It was just a splendid, splendid time. And My Sweet Lord, of course, Billy Preston doing that, and which he would play with George Harrison back in 1974 on the Dark Horse Tour. Ending with the beautiful I'll See You in My Dreams by Joe Brown on the ukulele, and all the confetti coming down. If you watch the end of that film, you'll see it. And it was one of those beautiful moments. And after I went out to a kind of a dinner place, like a hotel pub with all these people, and there was a huge table, about 10 people there, and I was sitting alone next to them, and they started talking to me, and they had come out of the concert too, and they couldn't believe that I came all the way from the States to see this concert. They invited me over, they bought me drinks, and we hung out for a few hours, just reminiscing how great this wonderful show was. Loved it. The concert for George, 20 years ago today. Can't believe that's been 20 years since I went to that. it was one of my, it was a special week in London. And over the next few years after that, in 2000, this is 2002, I went to London again in 2004 with my family for my 50th birthday. And then I went again in 2005 to see the reunion show of Cream. I went to the second show of, I think they did 5 nights at the Royal Albert Hall. I'd never seen Cream the first time around. Now, there's my Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker, Jack Bruce connection, seeing all of them together. Wonderful show. Little slower than the old Cream that we knew. And also Eric played the Black Strat, Blackie, I think, instead of the SG that he played with Cream back in the day. But Contra for George, very special, wonderful experience, emotional, tug of your heart moment musically. And for George Harrison, we miss you, George. 21 years ago today, he passed. All things must pass. There you go. So thanks for watching. Thanks for strolling down memory lane with me. Mazzy loves you.